The question of the day is, will the United States finally completely separate itself from the legacy of the British imperial system? I'm Diane Sare. This is June 11th. Good morning. This is the morning update of the LaRouche organization. So as people heard, if you listened to Harley Schlanger's update of yesterday, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, in response to a question from Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst at a conference in Moscow, on the involvement of the United States and others in Ukraine's recent actions against Russia, the attacks on 5 of their military bases, of which 3 failed, and the blowing up of bridges, killing civilians, etc. What Lavrov said is, well, of course, we know that the West is supplying Ukraine with weapons that can only be used with Western intelligence. So yes, there are American military advisors embedded with the Ukrainian troops and British, French, others. He said, but we know that it is 100% the British. Now, people may not remember that back in 2022, I guess it was early on, when the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up, the very short-lived British Prime Minister Liz Truss, who was there as long as the life of a head of cabbage, texted on an unencrypted line, the wrong cell phone, to Joe Biden, "It is done," moments after the pipeline was blown up. But no one so far in the Congress has had the guts to investigate this. So the British have been involved from the beginning. In fact, a colleague of mine, Richard Freeman, is going to be on the LaRouche Organization Symposium next week on an entire British war plan to have war with Russia, war with China, which already was being set in motion during World War II, when Russia and China were our allies fighting the Nazis and fighting fascist Japan. This is a very treasonous outlook, and we had a discussion earlier today with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, which I'm sure will continue in her webcast today at 11 a.m. I'm sorry, the discussion with her was yesterday, about the question of the difference between the British Empire and the American Revolution, and therefore the American Republic. And in the United States right now, we have, you might call, a multiply connected anniversary, which is 2025 is the 200th anniversary of the return of the Marquis de Lafayette in 1824, 1825 to visit the United States. And during this time, there was a great surge in industrial production. The industrial city of Paterson, New Jersey, which had really been initiated by Alexander Hamilton and George Washington and Lafayette overlooking the Great Falls, became a major production center of first silk, Colt rifles, but also it was the center, it became known as Silk City, of textiles, of fabric, major productive city. The Erie Canal, that's the other anniversary, the 200th anniversary. It was completed in 1825. The Erie Canal transformed the entire United States by allowing trade with ease from the harbor in Manhattan, New York City, inland into the Great Lakes and further west. The city of Syracuse experienced a 40-fold increase in its population as a result of the completion of the Erie Canal. And then, of course, 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the founding of our republic. The point of founding our republic, the point of the American Revolution, was to establish a society which placed the primary value on the creative spark in every human individual mind. That's what it means when they say every human being is created equal and endowed with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not property, not pleasure. Happiness. What gives us happiness? It makes us profoundly happy to know that our lives have meaning because we have been able to make a contribution to future generations which lives beyond us. That means things like discovering how to use uranium in nuclear fission power, figuring out how to get to the moon, figuring out how to purify water, irrigate farmland, increase production of food, build new cities. These are the things that live afterwards, which we delight in. And the point of having a government is to protect that, not by dictating every facet of people's lives, but ensuring an economy, which means we don't have to be digging around in the dirt for food, where you have food, housing, education, healthcare, that by your labor, by your work, you can secure a standard of living for yourself and your children, which allows the free play of the mind and development. What is the British Empire? Think of the British East India Company. You just crush people, loot them, starve them to death. The British East India Company starved about 80 million people in India during its reign of terror there, exactly as the Nazi practices in the concentration camps, or what Israel is doing now in Gaza, where you reduce people's caloric instinct and work them literally to the bone, literally to death. That's the British imperial system. And it's now dawning on the world that the United States is fundamentally different from them. Of interest, a new poll recently in Russia found that the United States, which was seen by the Russian people as being their number one enemy by 76% of the population in 2024, thanks to the Joe Biden, Victoria Nuland British imperial policy of backing the neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine. Now in 2025, only 40% of the Russian people view the United States as their number one enemy, and they view Germany, the new chancellor from BlackRock, Friedrich Merz, who wants to send long-range missiles to Ukraine to strike Russia. Germany is seen as the number one enemy, followed closely by the United Kingdom, and then Ukraine. So the Russians are pretty smart. They also know that Ukraine is not the instigator of the war, that it is indeed a proxy war. I will say it's not merely a proxy war against Russia. The British want to involve us in this, just as they did in Vietnam, because the intent is to destroy the United States. The intent is to destroy the American system, which is a universal system for the world. So this is fascinating. Back in 2013, only 3% of Russians considered Germany the number one enemy. So think about what has changed there. Now, as far as the NATO war policy goes, some of you may be aware that the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has commissioned a strategic defense review, in part written or advised by the infamous Anglo-American Russia expert Fiona Hill, born in the UK, but then became a citizen in 2002. She was an advisor actually in Obama and Trump administrations. Happily, she's not now. She's over in Great Britain. And what they're calling for is that the UK has to be prepared to fight a serious war with Russia by 2035. They need a 400% increase in military spending, missile defense. They say that the British people are going to have to really sacrifice. If we're going to have a war with Russia, be prepared to not have electricity, food, water. Why? Why do we want a war with Russia? Well, they don't bother to answer that question. And then coming back to the United States, I would say the support for the Gaza genocide for the British-run Zionist lobby, which has nothing to do with Judaism, but is a kind of racist cult, that is wearing thin. And I'm happy to say Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has shown her courage again and her connection to her base, as she puts it, the American people. She posted on X, anti-Semitic hate crimes are wrong, but so are all hate crimes. Yet Congress never votes on hate crimes committed against white people, Christians, men, the homeless, or countless others. Tonight, the House passed 2 more anti-Semitism-related resolutions. The 20th and 21st I voted on since taking office. That's like every month practically. Meanwhile, Americans from every background are being murdered, even in the womb, and Congress stays silent. We don't vote on endless resolutions defending them. Prioritizing one group of Americans and or one foreign country, she doesn't name the Israel nation, above our own people is fueling resentment and actually driving more division, including anti-Semitism. These crimes are horrific and easy for me to denounce, but because of the reasons I stated above, I voted present. So that from her. Now, finally, on the situation in Los Angeles, I have to tell you that we don't have a full picture of what is going on, but it is definitely very suspicious and suspect. We definitely do not want a federalized police force or Marines patrolling our cities to suppress people's right to protest. On the other hand, there are hundreds, at least, of paid provocateurs who came in, as one of my colleagues in Los Angeles said, on probably sometime Sunday. The majority of the protesters were nonviolent. Then this group of paid hoodlums came in, started setting things on fire. She reported to me that most of the people waving Mexican flags are not Mexican. This is a mess. The mayor of Los Angeles, Bass, is a product of the National Endowment for Democracy. So it's hard to say what is going on here. I hope that we get to the bottom of it. The whole policy on migration has been frankly mishandled. Yes, we need to vet people at the border. We don't want people crossing over willy-nilly. Obviously, we do have a problem of drug gangs and violent groups here, and that may be some of what's going on in Los Angeles, besides people who are straight out paid provocateurs. When you get to drugs and drug gangs, if you really want to shut that down, you have to go after Wall Street. And so far, that is what no one is willing to do. That is what Lyndon LaRouche called for. They should be bankrupted. We should reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act so that we can go through the books of the banks and find out who is laundering all of this money from drug trafficking, human trafficking, organ harvesting, drugs, guns, everything else that's going on. So far, no one has wanted to delve into that stinking mess. But that's where we're going to have to look. The issue is not, quote unquote, the migrants and for some reason, ICE has taken a much more aggressive approach, rounding up people who are not criminals, who are working, trying to support their family. So it seems to be a both side gang counter gang operation, probably to destabilize the nation and to destabilize President Trump and his administration when we are on the cusp of finally normalizing relations with Russia. He had a phone call with President Putin, a phone call with President Xi Jinping, and a phone call with war criminal Bibi Netanyahu, presumably to tell him to do not start striking Iran before we make a deal and take that potential for war off the table. So there's reason to be optimistic. That's why the British are freaking out and doing all kinds of dirty operations and calling for war with Russia by 2035. But do not be glib, do not be passive, and remember, the enemy is the British Empire.